Super excited to have with us today Nicole Roberts, who is the Vice President of I mangled it, the Vice President of People and Culture at MVAH Partners, which is they're involved in affordable housing, real estate across several states. And we've had a few really interesting conversations. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to join you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we were talking recently around employer culture. I know that you've had a lot of success in just bolstering and really amplifying the employer culture at MVAH. What are some of the lessons that you've learned at your own company and observing other companies around employer culture?
So the biggest thing for me with regards to employer culture is just creating that safety, that safe space for people. So there needs to be psychological and otherwise safety for people, that if you make a mistake, that you know who to reach out for help, and that you're not looking to solve problems all on your own and in a vacuum, and that there's any kind of ramifications for reaching out for help. One of my biggest things is that HR is not the principal's office, and that I always want to make sure that if somebody, gets in a situation in over their head, that they look to me and my team as being that place to reach out for help. Like, hey, I made this big mistake and I don't know what to do. And it's not, I hope they don't find out. It's, I hope that, I'm able to get a hold of them and to reach out to them. And I really need their help and their support. And that is just my overall point of view, that we should be there for support and for guidance, that it's, not punitive. And you really have to have a culture that encourages that, cross-functional communication and support. And that if a mistake is made, that you are completely wrapped in support and that you all work together, because that is the reputation of your brand, like it or not, not just a certain area of your business. And so overall, if your business is being represented in a certain way, you want to make sure that you work together and collaboratively to turn it around.
Yeah, every place that a company interacts with its customers is a sort of a microcosm played out of that company's employer culture. And it's going to leave, sort of a neutral taste or a positive taste or negative taste in the customers, with the customer, and you want it to be as positive as possible, right? And part of that is, just like you said, employees feeling empowered by each other, not as if they're going to get in trouble with leadership or something like that. Everybody makes mistakes, right? And it's very important to know that when you make a mistake at work, that your employer trusts you and has the confidence in you to learn from your mistake and get better, because nobody's perfect or as great as they can potentially be in their role when they start, or ever, even after they retire. There's always room for improvement. That's super interesting. And you know what? The other thing that you said there that was super interesting to me, and I think is a great segue, is around, I love that saying, the HR department is not the principal's office. And we all know what it felt like to get called to some of us anyway, what it meant to be called to the principal's office. I think I was called once. I'm mostly not a principal office kind of kid at high school. But anyway, it's a sinking feeling. And HR people go into HR because they're people, not because they want to, I don't know, punish people. So maybe we could just talk about the evolution of your role, Vice President of People and Culture. How did that come to be? And I know that you started there just at the outset of the whole pandemic thing, which is a year ago now.
Yeah, so I've been here, it was actually a year last Tuesday. So now it's been a year and 7 days. And I mean, brought into the role in recognition that with the growth that has been planned and that we're thankfully on track for, that we needed to have a dedicated senior resource that was experienced in building and developing teams, in assessing current infrastructure and systems and making recommendations to make sure that we had systems and processes in place to support the growth, and to really focus on people and on communication and on really clarifying expectations and making sure that targets were clear and there wasn't any kind of situation where somebody didn't really know what it meant to be successful in their role, that, you know, you would get to the end of the year and maybe having a conversation with your manager or your supervisor, and they say, oh, well, you know, that really wasn't what I expected out of you. And for the person to be like, well, I didn't know what the expectation was, you know, I mean, that would be failure on the part of leadership and certainly on the part of HR. So it is definitely a focus to make sure that people have really clear expectations, because nobody wakes up every day looking to not meet their expectations. They want to perform, they want to do a good job. People are intrinsically motivated to want to do a good job. And at the point in time that breaks down and kind of like that spirit is broken on that person is when either they don't honestly believe that they can succeed, and that's either because they don't quite understand the expectations or how to get there to realize success. And so just making sure that those systems are in place, whether it's a system of people, whether it's a system that is technology, just making sure that people are set up for success.
Mm. How challenging is it? How tough do you think it is in general, right, on average, to get somebody back once they've crossed that Rubicon from feeling intrinsically motivated to want to do their best, and then maybe getting a little bit cynical or jaded because of whatever's in place? It's not placing any blame on any, because sometimes it's just the technology that's getting in the, or the lack thereof, that's getting in the way. How tough is it to get somebody back from there?
I mean, you have to start with what started it. I mean, because that disengagement doesn't happen overnight, right? That disengagement will happen from a failed expectation and another failed expectation and another failed expectation, and it becomes a pattern. It's similar to when you're building trust with somebody. I mean, you start with saying you're going to do something and doing it. That's the very first building block of trust, and you just keep doing it. So when you get to a point where somebody is basically actively disengaged because they don't believe in either their ability to succeed, they don't see their part in the organization and how they can help the organization to reach their goals. I mean, you have to understand, if your job is to do this one little thing and you can't see how that impacts basically the greater good of the organization, then the organization needs to make sure that that's more clear and that you can see that direct line up. So for me, if I know that I need to fill 5 open positions or whatever, I know that if I don't fill those open positions, we have locations that don't have a community manager or maybe a service technician that aren't able to support our residents, that then aren't able to get us to our goal. If somebody else has another, piece in the plan for the organization, they need to understand how that impacts, so that renewed sense of hope and determination it is there, and that they can continue to want to come in and do their best every day. And the biggest thing that I can say is, when you feel like you're in a situation where you're kind of losing that hope and that you're not real sure, I mean, have a conversation with your manager, have a conversation with HR, and just say, hey, I've kind of like lost my North Star, and I need to be more clear on how I can impact the organization. And maybe it's even how I can impact this small piece that is part of a much larger one, but people need to understand their purpose, and they need to know that they're making a difference, because if you don't make a difference, who cares if you're there?
Right. That's a great point. You mentioned having a conversation. I think this gets to this gets to some of the nuts and bolts of employee engagement. You know, we talk about employee engagement as this big sort of holistic thing, and it is, right? And it really does plug directly sort of main lines into employer culture. But what are the sort of the nuts and bolts of employee engagement? You know, is it one, you know, real heartfelt conversation or profound or very important conversation, or is it many, or is it both? Like, and how does technology help with that?
So I think it's a combination, right? I mean, it helps. For me, I am a diehard advocate of weekly one-on-ones with the manager and anybody on their team. And the reason why I'm a diehard advocate of that is, one, it allows you to really work in small amounts of time on that relationship building over time. And when times get tough, you need to double down on your one-on-ones, not abandon them, because having that relationship is what's going to get you through whatever you're going through as an organization. Being able to also track that is very important. So, I mean, if you're using, like, I use OneNote actually to track mine over time, and I just, you know, copy and paste one page to the next, and then I can look at what we covered previously, and if I have to have any follow-up from that. I actually demoed a software yesterday. It was 15.5, and they have a really cool aspect of their one-on-ones where there is a kind of a pulse check, first of all, and you can actually see that trend over time. So if you had somebody who was always saying they're a 4 or a 5, and now they're saying they're a 1 or a 2, you know, you can look at that from a very high level and say, hey, you know, did anything happen at any point in time with that person that would cause that kind of drop in engagement or cause that drop in this person's passion towards their job? And it could be something outside the office as well, which we all need to erase the mindset of check your problems at the door. Nobody does that. So that expectation is very silly. People bring in every aspect of what's going on with them, and especially with people that are, you know, living at work, if they're still in that working from home, living at work capacity, we need to be really aware of the changes and the subtle nuances that happen with our people over time, and having those one-on-ones is a great way to stay on top of that and to be able to see those subtle changes.
That whole that pulse made me think of the stock market, or an EKG, or a you know, what do they call it, the machine that measures earthquake activity. What's it called again? The Richter scale, but there's a machine.
Scale.
Yeah, there's a machine that, you know, does it. That's really cool, because you can look at that, and like you said, you can pinpoint those times and see whether it's something that you did, and if it's nothing apparent there, then maybe, you know, sort of infer that maybe it's something in the employee's life. But at the same time, it also kind of alerts you to the fact, hey, maybe I should just kind of lean in a little bit with this employee. And I imagine that helps also with just the being geographically dispersed. Like you're not in rural, not all rural, but you know, you have a broad geographic footprint. So I imagine that communication is even more important.
Definitely.
Yeah. And you also, I know that you did a lot of real sort of heavy lifting. You put in the elbow grease at the beginning, the outset of joining MVAH, around implementing some solutions that have helped you with this too.
Yeah, so when I first started, I mean, my very first thing was, what do we have now, and how much can we just maximize that functionality before we look at anything external? Because nobody wants 15 different sign-ons for things, or a bunch of different systems. I mean, my kind of school of thought and point of view is the systems need to be in place to help people be better at their jobs and to do things in a more efficient and effective manner. And so if you have a bunch of systems that are kind of checking boxes of what HR wants, that's not helpful. I mean, nobody cares if HR loves your software. People care if on the employee self-service side, it's very user-friendly, and it is the very first place that people go, right? If the very first place they go is email, your software is failing you, because you need to be able to have some aspect of employee self-service, management self-service. You know, if you're getting 1 million emails a day or 1 million Teams messages a day, that means you haven't put systems and processes in place where people can first go and try to figure it out themselves before they go and sit and are, you know, waiting in an endless queue for you to get to their message. So we have Paycom for our HCM, and we utilize their Ask Here, which is a way for in the app or on the desktop that people can put in. I mean, one, we use it for our COVID-19 tracking as well. If somebody's impacted by COVID-19, they immediately get a whole list of resources and, you know, what to do next, because it is confusing. We are 12 months later, but if it's the first time you're experiencing it, it is confusing and it's a little scary and you're not sure what to do. So we try to answer those questions that you might have. And then we also use the survey aspect. And so I have a onboarding survey that is within 3 days of start. So it asks for feedback from the talent acquisition aspect, from the communication up until the start, and then actually those first couple of days. And then what was your expectation of the role and of the company, and how does that compare to the reality? Then we have another survey at 30 days, because we want to know, okay, not just in the very beginning when everything's all new and different and fun, 30 days in, how's it going? And there is a automatic review that pushes out for the employee to complete and for their manager. And then there is also a survey, because we want to know, again, how's it going? Have you made meaningful connections, excuse me, with your team? Do you have the tools that you need to do your job? And then after having that survey data and that 30-day new hire review, I schedule time to do a one-on-one video interview, and I dive deeper into that. So I have that data from the survey, from the review, and then I can just say, you know, hey, I noticed that you had, you know, gave us this rating on, you know, maybe tools. Can you tell me more about that? What can I do? I mean, we had somebody that said they didn't have the tools to do their job because they didn't have their job description. Yeah, that's definitely something that would be helpful.
Yeah, right.
So it's just, it's along the lines of what we were saying with, you know, making mistakes. For me, I'm glad to hear that a mistake was made or that we might have fallen short of expectations, because it gives us the opportunity to improve it. The worst thing that I could imagine is that somebody comes in, things are not what they expect, and they leave without giving us any feedback. Anytime somebody reaches out to me, my first thing that I say is, thank you for giving us the opportunity to address this. I mean, that's a lot of trust in us, right? I mean, that speaks volumes about our culture, that one, people will even reach out because they even believe and have faith that something's going to be done about it if they reach out.
It goes right back to what we were discussing at first here around not being afraid to reach out and ask questions. You know, even with HR, which is it's a different type of relationship. Obviously HR is seen as sort of the font of information about various things. That's where I can find out what I need to know. But even so, you've mentioned something that made me think of something. So, yeah, nobody cares if HR loves your software. I think that's what you said, right? And and it, you know, it's a little bit cute, but at the same time, it's true. It's true, right? You know, I've yet to see, you know, someone take a business case to, you know, to decision-making leadership to elect whether to okay, we're going to buy ABC software for HCM, and it would, it won on the fact that HR was like, yeah, this is great. We speak with users all the time where we're actually they wanted something else as maybe a learning department or HR department or whatever, and the other stakeholders involved in the decision making of the deal said, no, we want this instead, and there's a whole ball of wax of problems with that too from an organizational standpoint. But speaking directly to this, yeah, you're going to get that HCM software that you want by showing how it's going to improve matters for the organization, right? And then we get into this whole idea of, okay, there are these concrete, financially quantifiable general ledger, easily shown on the general ledger's types of benefits that everyone understands, and those are reasons. And then there's some of these, employee feelings, employee experience aspects to it. They're kind of tough to quantify from a financial standpoint, but we see them starting to have more of an impact on decision making around technology, especially with point solutions, like you said, with 15.5, looking at employees, any individual employee's sentiment or the extent of their degree of their engagement and this sort of stuff. So that's all super interesting. And I was going somewhere with this, and I lost it. But hold on, I'm going to get it back. Okay. We talked about communication and how it becomes, the technology for the communication becomes even more important with being geographically dispersed and all of this. This is not where I was going to go, but this is a good place to go anyway. I know that was just going back to the beginning of the pandemic again, because I know that you had there was a really interesting dynamic when you first joined the organization, where you took on a different sort of adjacent role, but it was almost a different title at first. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think it was around communication, employee communications, or something like that.
Yeah. So when I first started with the organization, my first day was March 9th. And I think that we're all seeing in our, memories from a year ago, March 11th was really kind of the kicking off point for most people of when they're what is this COVID-19 thing? What do I need to know about it? What do I need to tell my people? And just meeting twice a day on this. And so, yeah, my title was Vice President of People and Culture, but I really became the Chief Communications Officer for the company. I handled all of the internal communication. I actually also handled the communication with our residents, because we were saying, hey, this is something new and different that's happening. And also we wanted that language to be pretty similar. And so that's why we made the decision collectively that, one, we definitely have to be intentional in our communication with our people. And I was brand new. Nobody knew anything, of me. I didn't have a proven track record of anything with the company. But it was going to be very blatantly obvious that there was a miss if I wasn't the one that was spearheading the communication with our people. Care of your people, right? Care of your culture, making sure that our people who, we're a essential industry. And so our operations never stopped. The corporate office here in Ohio, we were told to work from home by our governor. He said, if you have the capability to work from home, do it. But our locations, they never left. The essential function of their job was to manage the location and support our residents. And so they were on site, but they needed to do it safely. They needed to have the tools to be able to continue to safely do their jobs. And we also had to set the expectations on the resident side as well. Like, hey, your community centers, we're going to be closing those because, we're being told that it's not safe to have them open. You're going to see maybe those routine work orders aren't going to be prioritized because we're trying to limit the amount of time or the amount of touch points that people have, in your homes. And so rather than just not getting work orders done, or rather than just going to a community center and it being closed, we wanted to have that proactive communication with our residents the same as we did with our people.
How much is can we really go back? I mean, this is super interesting to me because employee internal communications, right? And HR, they've been, I mean, I'm sure they've fraternized in the past, right? But
yeah,
they've separate silos, right? I mean, why?
It's so funny because you would think, obviously, you're going to want your people who are the experts in people to do the communication, but you're right. I mean, for a while, it was like marketing and PR that would do employee communication, or maybe your, CEO is doing your communication. I think that for maybe in the last few years, we've also really paid attention and had a real appreciation for the way that people receive messaging, and that it's not just what you say, but how you say it and how you deliver it and the words that you use, and making sure that you're even approaching people the right way. And so I think that having that coming from, HR, people ops, whatever your naming is for that function in your organization, just makes the most sense.
Did you and maybe you didn't, but I'm just curious. Did you notice? Were there any sort of combinations, or did it intersect at all the employee comms, right, with say some of the workforce management like scheduling and time and attendance? Did you see any intersections at that level?
Yeah, I mean, scheduling and time and attendance, all that stuff is already under my purview. So those things were already together. I also think that all of those are pieces of what makes up the employment life cycle, for lack of better words. And
Right.
so paying attention to that and making sure that you've got same verbiage, same point of view, sameness there helps people as well.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's shift gears for a second here, because I want to make sure we get to this topic, and I think we have about 5 minutes. Employee recognition. What is your basic philosophy around employee recognition? What do you think makes for best practices in employee recognition? If you had the ideal scenario or support or ecosystem or platform for employee recognition, what would it do?
So I'm actually attending the HR Tech Conference this week, and my hope is to find ideas and vendors and solutions for that, because obviously we have our systems and our infrastructure in place that now our sole focus for 2021 is welcoming, developing, rewarding, and recognizing our people, which is a wonderful position to be in, because not every organization has that luxury, so to speak, of being able to really focus on that. And so I'm very thankful for that. For me, understanding it's not one size fits all, not being emotionally attached to any certain process that's already in place or the way that you've always done it, or something that might have worked at a previous company may not be right for your culture. So you need to be really open to trying a bunch of different things, right? So one thing I'm looking for from a tech perspective is, how can we utilize the systems that we already have? What do we have? Like 15.5, for example, integrates with Teams. That's amazing. We're really pushing Teams utilization and adoption. So that would be amazing to have another thing that integrates systems that we already use. The ability to track effectiveness over time. So if you have a campaign where you're doing spot recognition, do you have more utilization in certain pockets of people or even certain areas of the country? If you implement a bunch of things at one time and you don't know ahead of time what you're hoping to get out of it and how you're going to measure effect, like what does effective look like, right? Are you looking to reduce turnover? Because all of the things that I just mentioned, those are the things that are going to reduce your turnover. And so if that is a focus for you, which for us it is, then putting those efforts into one, I mean, do you have exit interviews or an exit interview survey so you can find out first and foremost why people are leaving? But if you're getting feedback that you need to improve your training and development, you need to focus your efforts there. If you're getting feedback that your people feel like they're on an island, you need to double down on your communication and your recognition. I mean, if you have people who feel like they're just a number, that's an opportunity to recognize people and make people feel rewarded. And it's not one size fits all. So you might do peer-to-peer recognition. You might do cross-functional recognition where maybe somebody from a whole different department reaches out to somebody and says, hey, I was in a meeting today and I heard your name and I heard you're doing great things. Like, that's so amazing. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you're doing handwritten thank you notes. I mean, there's so many different things that mean so much to people because, you know, there are, as much as there are introverts versus extroverts and there's, you know, love languages, there's languages of appreciation at work, and what works for some people may not work for others. So you need to make sure that you can touch on what works for different people.
You could have, this goes back to conversation we had, actually an HR tech chat with a CEO of one of the employee recognitions, well-known employee recognition company. And yeah, there's this idea that you could have a culture of recognition, which is great. Some employers don't have that, right? And that's a different problem. You could have a culture of recognition. You could have leaders who are predisposed naturally to want to show recognition and, you know, and gratitude to their employees, right? They still maybe might not understand how any one given employee feels most valued in terms of that communication. They might communicate it in a way that anyone, so you need those you know, there's AI and this kind of stuff that's starting to infuse, or it's a big umbrella term, AI, but, you know, natural language processing, for instance, it helps organizations understand how any given employee, you know, feels appreciated in this sort of stuff. One of the, go ahead.
So we actually sent a survey so we had a town hall meeting on the 4th, and we said this is a big focus for us this year. So keep an eye out for some things that we're looking to plan or to implement. But then we actually sent a survey last week, and we said, we want to make sure that what we do is impactful to you. So here are some ideas. Rank these in order of least to most impactful that you feel would be of interest to you. And because not everybody is motivated by a bonus, for example. Not everybody is motivated by a day off. Not everybody is motivated by, some people don't want you to give them a shout out and to like some people are like, do not call me out. I don't want that. I'm not comfortable with it. Like, it's the opposite effect, right? Yeah. And then at the very bottom of the survey, we said, okay, we don't have all the answers. What are we missing? What would you like to see? Or what have you seen? Or, you know, what do you have experience with? And so we're getting some really amazing feedback. And actually, the direction that we kind of thought we were going to go, we probably won't, as a result of the feedback, because it wasn't going to even be the impact that we wanted to have on our people. And how unfortunate would that have been to have run full steam ahead into a program that wasn't even going to make people feel rewarded and appreciated.
And now we're getting into the importance of understanding your audience or your stakeholders, right? And this is an idea that transcends just only recognition. It can apply to customer success as well. Maybe you have a vendor that had what seemed like a great idea in terms of maybe changing its customer success structure, and it ends up being, kind of a hassle maybe for the customers, and that was unforeseen. And no vendor wants to go out there and specifically make it more difficult to work with them, but that can happen if you don't understand your market first, and your market being your employees, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Well, thanks, Nicole. This has been just fantastic, HR Tech Chat. We've covered so many topics. I want to thank you again for joining us.